Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Feature Focus with Infinite Crisis. I have here with me Annuvin, Cardell. He's going to be answering some questions about our new meta and what's going to be coming in the upcoming patches and changes.
Yes. So, I want to start off by just giving a quick overview. Undoubtedly, all of you have noticed how many changes have gone into the game as of recently, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone really understands the guiding principles behind why we're changing certain things and what it is we're trying to get at. And a lot of that comes down to what my role is here as the creative director for Infinite Crisis. It means that it's my job to make sure we have a very crisp understanding of what is uniquely our game versus what is other MOBAs or other even esports that exists out there. So as a general header, I feel like one of the most important things for any sport, whether it be competitive chess, competitive Counter-Strike, or again, just the standard MOBA genre, is such that skill makes a significant difference in terms of what people can do in any given interval. When you're playing as a person who is just better than you mechanically, they should be able to pull ahead of you in a way that allows them to basically beat you. And normally the way that works for our game is through credit velocity. So that's just one example of we are going to be making changes to allow for more player skill to really influence how different you're going to see in those, how much difference you see within credit velocities. Another big change that I feel is a guiding principle for us is aggression. Like, one of the things we really want in our game is to make sure that when you're playing it, it is really focused on superheroes and villains versus other superheroes and villains. Like, we don't really want a very passive farming phase. We don't really want a lot of time where you're sitting around waiting for something to happen. Like, no, we want basically a consistent level of action that eventually ebbs and flows and basically peaks into these larger team objectives, which I think is our third point. And team coordination is one of those other aspects that we think really will differentiate us, in the sense that every one of these products, every one of these games that we've ever made, in Turbine or otherwise, has a good amount of team coordination. And our goal is to make sure we have more team objectives on the map. Like, the addition to the orbital cannon, to Gotham Heights, we felt pulled us in a direction that is uniquely IC. And as a result, we're looking for more opportunities within our future maps, whether that be existing within Coast City and obviously all within Gotham Divide.
Definitely, and starting off with increasing skill cap, let's jump right into changing our meta, which is the first topic of the day. So let's talk a little bit about increasing the skill cap. I know we want players to feel, the more skillful players to feel like they can take an advantage and get an early advantage and then snowball into that. But we also don't want the newer players to fall behind and not be able to catch up in that term. So let's talk a little bit about the differences in that.
So, good questions. I think that when it comes to an existing player, and certainly more veteran players, a lot of these changes are going to be very, very simple to understand. The reality here is that you're going to get bonus credits upon actually killing something, as opposed to just colliding with it after you've destroyed it. And the simple fact that we keep the collision mechanic, I think, is something that a new player can really understand. But again, we want them to have more incentive to actually destroy things and defeat people than we want them to just for just being there. And I think that that's going to be one of those changes that allows them to basically to on-ramp into our game and then hopefully figure out exactly how to excel. And I think that by itself will help basically allow people to understand how to get credits, why credits are so important, and how that affects the toughness of your character.
Now, as a single player, I jump into a solo match by myself. Do you think I'll be able to carry my match alone with these new changes? Do you think I'll be able to take the laning phase, get a really early advantage, and just control the entire match by myself? Will I be able to do that?
Well, I think that actually a lot of that will depend upon the characters you play. There are certain characters who really just benefit a great amount by just credit velocity. If you are a person like Gaslight Catwoman, great example of a character who just scales super, super, super well. And I think that type of person who plays that character and plays it well is going to actually really excel in this new environment, because of the fact that they will be capable of basically capitalizing on the death pool mechanics, on pushing out lanes, because again, with an incentive towards aggression, I expect you're going to see more people extended, which basically is kind of her hunting ground.
Right.
But with that stated, if you're an experienced player, you also know that that's what's going to happen. It's clear that if you see guys like Catwoman in the match, you're probably not going to see her coming, unless, of course, you're running X-ray vision or some such. But again, she's still very frail. So the point here is that with that aggression, you know that you can turn on her and basically melt her really quickly. So there's still going to be ebbs and flows there. And I think that given what we're pushing towards here, I think that a lot more pressure is on her performance early than late, because we're trying to push more and more basically credits and more team objectives in there, which means that eventually she will fall off if she doesn't have a team to support her.
Right. Okay. So the objectives and the new changes to this meta, we really want to focus on team play, is what you're saying. You can't just focus on the one person and you carrying the whole entire match. We need you to get power relays. We need you to get Doomsday Device. We need you to get the orbital cannon and Gotham Heights. And it's not just one map. It's all of our maps that are getting this change, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So basically, we're looking for that opportunity in every single map we create, because I feel that these are the things that make Infinite Crisis unique. And because of that fact, it means that as we look around at each of those maps, I feel like Gotham Heights is in a fairly good place for that one in terms of how you distribute credits and its big team objective that exists right there in the middle of that map. Whereas I feel like Coast City is kind of slowly pushing towards it. And there are some changes that we'll talk about in a bit that I think will really highlight that. And this is one of those things that is very much a guiding principle for Gotham Divided. And a lot of the things I'm talking about now are almost setting the stage for what you would expect to see in Gotham Divided.
Right. So let's jump into credit, the credit changes that we're going to have, and we're going to take some time to really explain what's going on with this and what exactly we're doing. So to be clear, I know we talked about credit changes in last hitting, and then we'll get into more detail. Is this just to the drones, or is this to creatures too? Will I, in the jungle, be able to stomp out creature coins?
So you jumped ahead a little bit. I'm impressed. See, clearly you've been playing this game a lot, so you know. So basically, I feel there are two different aspects that I wanted to push skill into our game. One of them is obviously in that last hitting, the death blowing mechanic, which I think is already there to an extent. For people who've been playing our beta, you can see it in terms of there is a bit of a difference in terms of how many credits you get upon death blowing something versus in colliding. And that's to reward that skillful play. It's to reward that level of micro that is really important for these styles of games, and is really rewarding that mechanically differentiates you from other people. But we obviously don't want to lose that collision mechanic that really is central to everything we built so far. It makes our game approachable. It makes our game more capable of being able to be visually understood. So what we just want to do is create a bit more distance there, so there is more room for a person to do really, really well versus a person who literally is just doing collision and isn't really focused on that at all. But with that stated, aggression still comes into play as well. And that's actually where the second changes come in, which is basically stomping. So at this point in time, you can... we're moving towards it, and should I say, is you can stomp on credits. And basically that's a way of ensuring that another person, if they weren't death blowing something and they left their credit on the ground, you basically just crush that credit out of existence. So they can't come and get it. You basically have a way of allowing for a very aggressive, like Arcane Green Lantern to be patrolling that line and just waiting for people to miss shots and then just grind it right out. And they can basically push in there because we wanted more tension between you're being aggressive, you're trying to actually deny people's credits and credit velocity. They know where you're going. They can get free harass. And we wanted that just continual skirmish on that front line.
So to recap, in case you missed the first, I'm here with Annuvin, and we're talking about changing the meta of Infinite Crisis. And the main three topics were increasing the skill cap, the overall aggression, which we're going to have more aggression in, and then team fights and team battles and upping the overall team experience as you get those objectives and certain things like that.
Yes.
And we talked about, a little bit about credit stomping. Now, in Infinite Crisis, it's a little bit different. If you don't know about it, the credits fall on the ground when you kill the drones. And you just mentioned you can stomp out the credits to prevent your enemy from getting the credits themselves. So if I'm in lane with a ranged player, am I going to have some sort of disadvantage there as a melee? I can see me trying to pick up my own coins if I can't get the last hits, and Green Lantern is on the side just blasting me down with those missiles, and I'm Batman, and I don't want to exactly jump in on him, but I want to get those last hits as well. Am I losing some credits here by not last hitting?
Well, I wouldn't say losing is the best way of putting it. I think that the situation, especially if you're in an uneven lane, you're already at a massive disadvantage.
Okay.
There is a reason for it. If you're, let's say, 2v1 and you're Doomsday, because clearly you're going to be Doomsday, because why wouldn't you be? And let's say that the other two people that are facing up against you are both missile-style characters. They already can shove you back underneath your turret. Like, they can already put you at such a disadvantage that you're in a bad place, and such that you will actually just need to learn the basic skill of being able to farm under a turret and hope that the rest of your team comes down through team coordination and allows you to set up a great gank, because those people are going to be so far extended at that point, there really isn't much they're going to do to get away. With that stated, if you're just in a 1v1 matchup, you have some options in terms of whether you're going to be a lane bully or whether you're not going to be. And if you're winning that exchange, there's nothing saying that you can't actually push through and force a person who's kind of being a little sloppy upon last hitting to basically to miss those shots and then punish them by denying them entirely any form of credit advantage they might get. And with that stated, that means that you just have to play that character a little differently. I mean, the way our balance is a lot of our bruiser-style characters are meant to itemize in a certain way, which means you can take a certain amount of hits, and there's just the amount of sustain that you can actually bring into lane that will help you.
Do you feel having these new last hits and dropping the coins on the ground, do you think this is going to extend the laning phase? Are we, or is it in the opposite way as it rushes the laning phase? I know you said you wanted to slow the laning phase a bit down, but it sounds like champions will be able to snowball a little bit if they can prevent other people from getting the coins and stomping them out. Is this going to rush it?
Well, the way we're looking at it now is we pulled out a bunch of credits from our laning phase specifically for this, because we actually wanted to make sure that there's more credits to go around in the team objective phase. I mean, with that stated, in an uneven skill matchup, you're still going to see people start to snowball, because now not only can they gain credits, but if a person's really just not being aggressive and they're not getting supported, they will also be able to force that person's credits even further down in terms of you may see credit differentials, whereas now you see them by roughly around 20 to 30%, you may start seeing them more like 50%. And once you start getting to a 50% credit differential, like, that's bad. I mean, that's really bad for the people who are on the losing side of that equation. So I mean, you're definitely going to see that, but the whole point of pulling them out of the laning phase has been to push them out into the team objective phase, such that a person, you may be winning top in Co City, and maybe you're pulling even in terms of your bottom lane in Co City. But once that raider spawns, and once the other team objectives of the relay spawn, that's when you're going to start seeing, basically that's when you're going to start seeing the team makeup really matter, and where you're going to see people start pulling ahead.
So Harley Quinn just came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Harley Quinn is one of our support players. She really helps the marksman and boost them up a little bit. If I'm in a lane with a marksman and he's last hitting, am I losing out on gold because I'm not picking up these coins off the ground because he's not leaving them there for me?
Oh, no, not at all. So we still, as a core mechanic within our game, we still share credits.
Okay.
So ultimately, if you're near another person who's playing really well, that means they're feeding you, and you in turn can feed them. Again, that aggression, that superhero team up, is really what we're looking for, superhero or supervillain in many cases. So you can expect more of that, and I feel like each one of these changes allows us to really focus in on you just playing your role and playing it really well. And I think that's the most important aspect here, is we want to make sure that you're getting rewards for doing the things that you do well. So
sidekicks are going to be able to help out their Batman all the time, and they won't fall back and they won't fall down and lose out on any credits.
Yes, assuming they're not in YOLO queue and just running around. That's correct.
So with this new credit stomping and last hitting and all this, am I going to fall behind if I don't last hit and all my credits are getting stomped out? Is there a way for me to catch up?
Well, I would say the best way for you to catch up currently would be to become just a good, strong team contributor. I mean, if you aren't gathering any credits at all, if you're not getting any currency from your laning phase, that's not necessarily a good place for you to be regardless.
Yep.
So in that case, I would recommend either swapping out with your jungler once you get to a certain tier, or conversely, getting a babysitter, because you're going to need someone to come through and just kind of help you get through, because part of the skill of this game is in your ability to harvest currency. If you can't do that, then you're not going to excel nearly as well as someone who can.
So in the live environment right now, the bruisers feel a little bit strong. Was this mechanic put in to kind of set them back and help range folk out a little bit in order of keeping the credits in line?
Well, I would say this mechanic we added in specifically to allow for there to be multiple tactics for how you actually want to play your lane matchup, such that you could have the shark in the water, as we always refer to Batman, as he's running along the line, trying to use the drones to basically block skill shots, while at the same time really punishing sloppy play. But at the same time, again, that incentivizes him to be further up in that line as opposed to further back in the line, which means he himself becomes more susceptible to ganks. So you end up with this constant tension of again, that aggression. And as we go further and we tune more and more balance, you can expect that we'll be using these as our guiding lights.
So as a new player coming in, I see these. When I hit someone, I hit the drone on and it drops the coin on the ground because I didn't last hit. Mm-hmm. The coin, it sits there on the ground. Yep. Do I have a certain amount of time to pick it up? Does it just linger there? Do I wait?
So currently, the coin will wait for a period of time, and then eventually it will start to blink and then fade out and then disappear. And the way that typically works is that your coins, the coins that are for your team, are gold. The coins that are for other people, those are silver. That's how you know that if you're going to just stomp on a coin versus if you're actually going to obtain the credits that are within it.
Okay, is there anything different that I need to do? We use the term stomp, but just to be clear, do I have to click any buttons? Do I have to fire at it, or is it just walk near it like you can with your own credits? And
it's very much just like your own credits. If you walk near it, it will actually make a similar sound actually, and then you can rest assured that your opponent has been is sadder because you've taken some of their money away from them.
Are we gonna have any visual effects that show how much gold you've stomped out, and in terms of like we have the UI to show how much gold you earn when you pick up that. I want to see how much I stop Leo from getting, when we're playing on live.
So our plan is ultimately to add a full-on score tracker for just that, so you can see exactly how many credits you've basically taken away from the other team. But we don't have that happening right now.
Okay, all right. So we talked about the credit stomping and the last hitting. It led into a little bit of the aggression, and let's go more into the team coordination.
Yep.
The last hitting idea, is it going to be on anything other than drones? Is it going to be on towers or doomsday device or anything of that sort, or creatures in the jungle?
So the way it currently works for us is that every single time you've ever dealt the death blow to something, its credits have always come to you anyway, and they've been split based off an area around you. So those mechanics are still the exact same.
Okay.
And the difference ultimately is that you're not going to have a creature in the in the urban jungle dying for no apparent reason and leaving a credit there. Like standardly, that doesn't happen. So in that sense, your jungle path should remain very much the same. I would say the biggest difference that you're going to see is that when you look at any of our team objectives, they're just worth significantly more credits because of the fact that we've pulled some of those credits out of the laning phase and basically just kind of shunted them there. I mean, we want our credit velocity more or less the same. I mean, we still want there to be a skillful play, both in terms of the decisions you make while you're in lane and while you're basically trying to outplay someone, but also in terms of the artifacts you build. And the best way of doing that is to make sure you have a limited amount of funds. That way, you have to make a decision, and that decision really matters to you. And there are those points where you have a little bit of advantage that you can then, through regression, parlay into a much larger advantage. And that's why we wanted to make these team objectives worth more, because that level of team coordination is what will basically separate the men from the boys. I mean, you may have a great deal of individual skill, but if your team isn't on the same page, if you're not on point on making sure that you're monitoring what's coming up when and how many people you need to dedicate to it versus not, then you will still lose even if you are individually more confident in the person you're laning against.
And to be clear, if I play Gotham Heights all the time, am I going to be seeing these new features too, or is this just a Coast City change?
Oh, this is actually global. Like again,
okay.
Like all of the changes we're talking about are entirely global for all aspects of our game. I would say the biggest differences that you're going to see is that in terms of Gotham Heights, its credit values haven't changed overly much. Because in the grand scheme of things, for Gotham Heights, it is mostly focused on you get a lot of credits based off of captures and kills. For Coast City, we want Coast City to be more of a map that's built around team objectives.
Okay.
Like that's where you're getting the majority of your credits from. And then for the sneak peek, for Divided, we're actually going to go back to, we're pushing more of those back into lanes. So that's why those avenues will be more important for that map.
Okay. And we kept talking about team objectives. Are we going to be giving out more experience for these team objectives? Are we going to be giving out more credits for these team objectives? Like, how is this going to be set out?
So right now, we're actually looking to give both a little bit more experience and more credits.
Okay.
Just in general, like our goal is to make sure that when you take a team objective, it is something that is actually both worth the return of investment, rather than you staying in lane and just destroying an entire wave of drones, which you could absolutely do if the other person just leaves to go do the team objective. You need to be in the losing bargain of that, because we want there to be big fights around team objectives. And if a person just goes and takes a team objective while you're staying in lane, even if you manage to pay out and perfectly death blow everything that's there and get some decent harass, you're still going to be behind based off the net amount of credits that team will have gotten. So.
Okay. When a person leaves the lane to miss out on last hit farm, do you feel like there's enough time where they should be doing these team objectives and should be helping out, or should someone stay in the lane? Is there a give and take to this a little bit?
I think that overall there's always going to be a little bit of give and take, because either way you look at it, you don't want to have everyone leaving, just suddenly leaving their lanes to go and just run around in the urban jungle, just trying to find stuff to do. I mean, you still want to have a good amount of tension because your win conditions, at least for Coast City and eventually for Gotham Divided, remain the same.
Okay.
You win by destroying the power core. So if you can actually destroy a turret while at the same time securing a few team objectives, that's always a good thing. And that's the level of tension that I feel that people are going to have to figure out, and that's where I think the new meta is going to really come from.
Okay. So we talked about the credit accumulation and the changes to the last hitting and stomping, taking away your enemy's credits. Let's now jump into the drone behavior because we're changing this up a little bit. If you want to jump into what exactly we're changing in the drone behavior.
So I wanted to pull out a couple examples of exactly how the principles of aggression, skill, and coordination are all coming into play. And I feel like some of the changes that we're going to do to drones are great for that one. So currently, the way this works is that if you end up attacking the other person, their drones will then attack you back. We are changing that such that early aggression is not it's not so punitive to the poor drones. And by that I mean, if you're a poor drone shooting at Batman, you know what's coming for you, so you just feel sad for yourself, and you're very short lease on life. Whereas now, what will happen is drones will not actually actively look to support their superhero or supervillain compatriots. They will in fact attack enemy team members if there are no other drones available, which means there is still a bit of skill in terms of determining when you want to push away versus when you don't. Like for instance, you may see some people decide to destroy the last drone knowing full well that our drone aggro does a significant amount of damage, but overall, if you're just in that wave and fighting, you can actually fight with very, very little punitive risk. And this is one of those examples where a bruiser could win versus a marksman could win. And anyone with that range tension you're going to see, because while Batman or any other bruiser could be wandering up and down the drone line, they can be just getting harassed almost willy-nilly. So while they could stomp on those credits that you happen to be missing, they're still taking damage, and vice versa will actually happen as well.
So are we upping the damage on these drones at all, or is everything staying the same? It's just the new drone behavior won't instantly jump on a champion if there's something else for them to do.
So actually, we're just changing the behavior. So in this case, drones are still very dangerous, and anyone who's been playing for a while knows that drones tend to be OP early, so it could be bad news for you if you end up pulling that aggro.
So as a melee character, I'm going to want to stay in the fight. I want to get those last hits. And, say I'm laning against Joker and he's just shoving out those presents and tossing out everything he can to just push the lane as fast as he can. How am I going to be able to stay in the pile to get these last hits while not taking so much damage and keeping an eye on how many drones he has? Because if he has way more than me, then I'm falling behind, and now I'm going to start taking damage while I'm trying to pick up these coins.
Right. And I think that the answer for that one is, again, it's all based off that matchup. I mean, Joker is still a very, very bad matchup for a lot of people because of just his sheer amount of area control, his ability to zone, the amount of damage on his resettable punchy, and his mobility. All those make him a very, very dangerous matchup. So in that sense, it really comes down to knowing full well, being able to anticipate where he's going. You want him to be, that he's going to throw a present into the drone line, for instance. You want to stay outside of that one. His present may not kill everything that's there, so he may get some credits, but he won't get all of them. And during that time, you can basically make him pay by running back through and just stomping those out. Or conversely, if you know he's coming in for the present, you can then push in on him and start attacking him, knowing full well that you will not pull drone aggro any longer. So you have a few different options in terms of that, the triangle of things you could do. It's just a question of which one you want to do and when. And obviously based off the difference of lead, that will also change it. I mean, an early Joker who doesn't do very much damage is very different than, a Starheart enabled Joker.
So I have these drones under my tower, and they're just wailing away at it. If I walk up to them, are they going to change directly onto me, or is they just going to keep focusing on the tower? What do I do to get them out? Is there any way to change the aggro to me?
Well, at this point in time, in terms of your order, you actually will be the person, at least currently, you will be the person whom they will shift to upon your arrival. In that sense, we actually did want it so that you could defend your turret just by virtue of being close enough to them. But with that stated, there's questions whether or not you want to do that or not. So there's that to keep in mind.
Okay, so there is a chance for me to save my tower if it's almost going down, and I just have to take some damage from these drones in order to do it.
Yes.
So the drones, should I focus on the ranged ones? Should I focus on the melee ones if I want to take out the help the tower from being taken out fast? Which ones do more damage?
So at this point in time, I actually think over time, you're better off attacking the ranged ones, just because the turrets themselves will prioritize based off proximity. So it will be defending itself against the early ones. It's the later ones that are just have the longest amount of time to deal their full payload. So you really even want to start on what I refer to as the hover tank drones first, because they're the ones who will do the most significant amount of damage and take the longest to destroy. So work your way back from there. They also, incidentally, have the majority of credits from a credit wave in them. So really, if you can focus on them early, you're almost guaranteed to get full value from destroying them.
That's a good tip. I wasn't sure about that. So I want to take out these bigger guys in the back that spawn every few waves.
Yes.
And I can get more credits from these guys, and it will pretty much avoid the drones pushing to my side because I'm taking out one of their biggest damage dealers.
Yes, so long as obviously your opponent doesn't do the same thing to you.
Right.
You absolutely will end up shoving that lane just by virtue of that, while getting a decent amount of that wave's credit value.
Okay. We talked about how we wanted to, make the laning phase a little bit slower and not so quick. Mm-hmm. Well, with the last hitting and the new drone behavior, do you feel like this is exactly what's going to do that, or do you feel like people are going to want to shove these waves and just get the waves in there because people are the enemy is going to focus on last hitting perfectly and not just clearing it out from the tower right away?
Well, I actually think that one of the things that we definitely have going for us in this direct model is because as you shove those lanes, we still have the mechanic where if your turret ends up killing a drone, it leaves behind a greatly reduced amount of credit for them. So again, incentivizing aggression. We want you to shove that lane as hard as you can. And even then, a person who's actually very, very good at death blowing things and last hitting them, they may have a very difficult time just being able to maintain that level of focus. And when that happens, you can tell your success because you'll see a bunch of very tiny little credits that are there, little pint-sized credits that very well signify a massive reduction in terms of currency.
Okay, so as a new player, and I don't understand this new feature of stomping and picking, getting last hits.
Right.
I'm not totally penalized if my tower takes the last hit. I'll still get a coin that is just smaller and the amount is a lot lower.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's jump into my favorite new feature. This is gonna be pretty interesting, and I don't think the players are really expecting this. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, and I've tried it out. Buying at turrets. Is this something that's going to change the meta completely?
It's really hard to say. I think that... So, when we talked about, again, the things that make Infinite Crisis what it is, aggression is obviously one of those things. Team coordination is definitely one of those things. And I actually feel that the entire conceit of being able to go back to your base is really important and definitely gives you a breather in the action. But if you are a character who's doing very well sustain-wise, or conversely, if you're a team that is doing really well in terms of maintaining your lane, why should you have to go back in order to spend the money you've gotten? And it's that exact same mode in terms of if you're in a lane and you're winning, why do you need to go all the way back to do these things? So because of that fact, what we decided to add was, look, it doesn't really add much gameplay for you to go back so you can go buy stuff so you can run back in. Because the person who plays really well, they're timing their backs before they come forward anyway. So they're not losing anything. If anything, only new players are being penalized because they may leave at the wrong time. And as a result, we decided to just enable being able to purchase artifacts at turrets. And this has had some knock-on effects that I think are important to call out as well. So consumables will not exist in our game after this point, once we make this change.
So the consumables, just to jump in real quick, these are the potions that you could buy that were just single uses. You could buy multiple of them, up to 5.
Yes.
Is this taking out the Tektite vial as well?
No, because so the difference is our artifact tree and artifact foundry is really based heavily around activatable items and triggerable items. So we wanted to basically double down on that, and therefore we wanted more Tektite vials and fewer consumables just in general. So all of our health packs are going away, and they'll be being replaced by objects similar to Tektite vials that have a certain number of charges. Now, while you can buy them at your turret, you can't refill them. You have to go back to your base to refill them. So you still have that tension in terms of that one.
Okay.
This will inherently change how we're going to cost things like regen, because as you can imagine, the ability to sustain just gives you the ability to potentially just crush a lane. And if you were playing well, then you really can, again, aggression. You're incentivized to be as aggressive as you possibly can. And if a person's really, really low on health, they will have to recall, because that's the only place where you get free health. And once that happens, you then can basically impose your will on them in that lane and just basically force them to farm on a turret unless a person ganks you. So those are things to kind of consider in terms of how this is going to change, how this is definitely going to change the meta in Coast City. And I definitely think it will change what you will see in the initial matchups. I'm actually kind of looking forward to the tension of trying to cast it too, because in the past you could just look back to see when a person recalled.
Yeah.
Now not so much. You really do have to pay a lot more attention.
Yeah, you have to pay. I'm thinking about it myself as I'm
Yes.
going through, and I'm saying, wow, I really need to make sure that I'm paying attention to every champion to see if they're at tower
Yes.
when their health is relatively high and what exactly they're doing. So you need to pay attention to the artifacts at all times, and
Yes.
you know. You said you can't recharge these tech type vials, and there's going to be multiple tech type vials. Consumables are going to be completely gone.
Yep.
Are we going to be able to have multiple tech type vials, multiple of these charge, health or will refreshers?
Yes, you should be able to buy as many of them as you choose to. I
Okay.
mean, as a general rule, I'm guessing that, at least what we've seen internally, you don't see too many people stacking multiples at once, just because there are a few different ways for you, obviously, to get them back. Again, if you're laning with your Harley, you don't have to worry quite as much of that, so you have some baked-in sustain right there, versus if you are doing other things, eventually you do want to go back because you want to be off the grid. And once you come off the grid, you can come back in, either ganking a lane or potentially pushing to go take a team objective. So with all the changes to aggression and the ability to incentivize it, I expect it'll be, in some ways, easier to tell where people are, because they should be more omnipresent. Like, they should be more on your minimap. But when they disappear, you really are going to have to focus on what direction they were headed when they disappeared, and what team objectives are coming up next. And this is what we're hoping that will lead to a much faster-paced, more dynamic game.
Okay, and you brought up a good point, with health regen. So now when you're able to buy artifacts at these towers,
Yep.
I played and I instantly started off with health regen because I knew that doing this, and not having consumables, I would be able to stay in lane longer. And I also picked a champion that didn't have any will, so I wouldn't, fall behind
Yes.
in that sort of aspect. Does this give an advantage to those champions that, that build health early and get the health regen early and don't have any will secondary vitals, and they have, like Batman, he has energy.
Right. Well, I think that to a certain extent, those characters already had some advantages. I feel that right up front, the change will make a lot of characters whom don't utilize two forms of really heavily disposable vitals, they're going to just inherently feel better. Many of them already felt better. I mean, in many ways, when you're playing an energy character, you don't have to worry about monitoring how much will you have at any given interval. And in this case, it's not going to be any different. I would say the biggest change is going to be that if you're jungling, let's say, you don't even have to go back to base. You can run out behind lines to a nearby tower and go buy something and then just go run right back off into the urban jungle. Like, there are a lot of different options you will have in terms of those tactics, but in terms of just basic lane matchups, I definitely think that you are going to have some significant advantages, at least at first. I'm going to guess that over time, you will see those start to erode, just because you normally have a decent, most of those characters tend to be very, very strong in certain phases of the game, and that's not going to go away. So, I mean, it really is more on them to parlay that in an aggressive fashion to basically stifle their opponent so that they can win before that character comes in their own.
That was my next question. You talked about the jungle being able to come into the lane or just go to a nearby tower. Is this any tower that they can buy at? Like Coast City has 3 sets of early towers,
Yep.
or can I just go to like the closest tower to me and buy the closest friendly tower to me and buy right there, and then just go right back into the jungle? And
Yes. As long as it's your turret, you can buy it. You can't run up to your enemy turret and buy something while it's happening. And also, this is going to force a little bit more awareness from folks, because if you run back to your turret and you're like, oh, I'm kind of hurt, I'm going to buy some stuff, there's a good chance that, again, the aforementioned Gaslight Catwoman runs out of the darkness and kills you and then runs away. So there's certainly a level of discretion you need to use when you're doing these things, but absolutely, any nearby turret is a perfectly viable option to buy things at. Again, I want to make sure that people understand, Gotham Heights, those aren't really turrets, they're control points. You cannot buy control points, you can buy turrets.
Okay, so on Gotham Heights, there's no change to this buy at turrets. We'll still need to back to base to refill our charges, get our health and will back, or buy artifacts.
Yes.
And on Coast City, we can't refill the charges at the turrets,
Yes.
and we can't regen our health or
free.
will for free.
Yep.
at the turrets.
Yes.
We have to go back for that.
Yes.
So the only change here is that we're buying artifacts at any friendly turret on Coast City.
Yes.
Okay. So as a jungler, right, I take Gaslight Joker and I start off with some health regen and I just keep going back, farming the jungle as I will. My Fetid Cleaver gives me that health back. My passive is stacking up. And I don't really have to go back yet. I can just go to tower, go right back into the jungle or gank, and I don't take any damage from my health bar. Can I just keep going? Do I ever need to go back at this point if I just stay at full health?
No, you really absolutely would not. And this is where, again, it goes back to aggression. Like, so eventually, you can choose to do that and never, ever counter-jungle anyone, but in that case, there's a question of how much you're adding to your team. In the case where your lanes are winning, that's perfectly acceptable.
Okay.
But even then, I would argue, are you really doing everything? Because if your lanes are already winning, you should be taking more, you should be pushing more leverage that you have.
Okay.
And it's kind of that exact same model where it's, like, if you're left to your own devices, you're clearly going to be an advantage. The point here is aggression. People are trying to shove you back down to basically stop you from being able to just do your own tactics. And that's what we want to see more of.
So if I'm in a lane with you, 1v1, and you take me down, we trade, you take my health down a lot more than I take yours. You're at 75%, I'm at 25%.
Yep.
I feel like I need to go back to base or your next set of trades are going to kill me.
Yes.
Am I losing now because you've gained more credits by staying in lane, and instead of backing because you're at 75% health, you just go to your tower, you buy the next set of item, tier 1 Starheart or something like that because you just got enough credits.
Yep.
When I get back into lane, are you going to snowball off that very first back that's happening, and am I going to ever be able to catch back up from this?
Well, again, the hope would be that yes, you can, as long as you keep your wits about you and call on team help while you can, and we'll just hope that you're not losing every trade. I mean, there are obviously some trades that go horribly, horribly wrong. Like, maybe you derp for a bit, and this is the reason why you end up taking so much damage. You're not going to be at such a disadvantage, because keep in mind, when you come back, you'll still be at full. Let's say you had roughly even credits. You're going to come back with fairly similar itemization. You're just at full health.
Okay.
Like, so as a result, that person has whatever not consumables, whatever packs they burned, whatever charges they burned in order to try to stay in lane. Whereas you are chock full. You've refilled all of yours, you've come back through. Again, your items are roughly comparable, and also they've also shoved up. So they're more susceptible to ganks. It's just a question of whether or not your team can capitalize on that newfound opportunity you have.
Okay. Is there a good way to counter, an enemy going back to their tower and trying to buy? Or I'm trying to think if I have a surveillance camera, should I put it, in Coast City in the top lane, we have the stealth pad along the upper house at the power relay.
Yep.
Should I put one on the very corner to kind of keep vision of the enemy champion maybe going back to tower so I can see if he's buying items? Or
yeah, I mean, I guess that is a good question. I mean, I think it depends largely on exactly what your tactics are going to be. Because let's say, for instance, let's say that trade has happened and it's you going back at the 25% and I'm at 75%. If I'm running X-ray vision, I don't really need to be throwing any wards out there. Okay. Or any surveillance, any form of vision at all.
Yep.
Instead, what I'm going to use, I'll use my X-ray vision. If I've already called in a jungler to gank you, I'll just use my X-ray vision to make sure that you're where you're supposed to be.
Okay.
And then potentially we'll just do a dive. Whereas obviously, if I'm not running with X-ray vision, then there's a question of where do I want to put my surveillance devices? I mean, there's a debate there whether or not you actually want to put it just on the edge of the turret, so you can always maintain vision of who's going where, because there's also going to be enemy junglers who are going to come in probably to purchase things at a nearby turret, and having the ability to see what's happening at those points will also help you.
That actually brings up a good point. So when the jungler is not in vision of you, you don't see any of his or her items, artifacts, or the credits that they have earned or the levels they've earned while they're hidden in the jungle. If I keep an eye on the nearby towers, I'll be able to get vision of them and then be able to scope out the artifacts that they're building and kind of take advantage of that and call out to my team.
Yes.
So in benefit of the jungler, it's actually better for them to go to one of the earlier turrets instead of showing yourself just for if you can't gank.
Right.
You just go to one of the earlier turrets, buy there so you don't grant vision to someone and see what you're actually buying.
Yes, and that's also assuming a great many things. Like, one of those things you have to make the assumption for there is that the other person already has deeper surveillance devices to be able to see where you're going, because then you're potentially paying the cost in terms of just that more time in the field.
Okay.
Because if you moved over like that and you've decided, oh, I'm going to go back and purchase these things because I don't want to actually betray anything about what I'm doing, you have to take into account that the enemy jungler may not be doing that. And if you actually don't have any deeper surveillance devices there, you can't. You're just basically paying a time penalty. So I mean, again, in terms of aggression, typically the person who pulls the trigger first is the one who wins. And this is one of the things which I feel is going to be very evident in terms of what you're going to see, or in terms of purchasing behavior for folks, where they go, and when they decide that creative tension of, I'm going to stay in the field and hope that my regen allows me to basically uptick back, versus I'm going to go back in order to top myself off because I don't want to be susceptible to a gank. And the taking away the buy mechanic as making that it's obvious that I should go back has led to some very interesting tensions in terms of what people do depending on which characters they're playing.
Okay, so I'm thinking of another idea. Top lane, I'm Gaslight Batman, and I really want to shove out the other Gaslight Batman.
Mm-hmm.
If I take his tower relatively quickly, I get my jungler to take his tower, can he still buy from that location where the tower was taken, or is that immediately taken out from them?
That is immediately taken away from them.
So I've pretty much canceled out a spot where they could buy artifacts from by taking this tower.
And this is one of the interesting things that we've also seen is that, again, if you defended turrets that are right near the epicenter of the map, the way I look at most of our games is everything starts with a midline of control. And as time goes on, as things are destroyed, that becomes more and more uncontrolled territory. What has actually happened because of this change is that if you can't make that earlier exchange, the midline of control starts to shift further and further out.
Okay.
And it already would have happened like that, but now it's a difference of, we have a fight for Raider, it's uncontested, I run up and spend that money right away, and then I run back over and I start fighting other people. Or we have a fight for the Doomsday device, we go and fire it, and we end up taking the opponent's relay away. We just move right back up to that top turret, buy, and then immediately begin shoving along the top lane. Like, you start to see more mechanics along this line that can really, really be, they can be very snowbally if the other team lets them get to the stage. So
on live right now, we see a lot of, one person top lane, two people bot lane, and kind of two junglers. And the pro matches in KGB, we've seen a lot of these strategies. Do you think this will change it up a bit and kind of switch and make two people go top to try and take out that tower, because the turrets up there are a lot closer to the Doomsday device than the bottom?
Yep.
So do you feel like they should take out those, because when a Doomsday device comes up or the power relays come up top, people will be able to buy really quick from that tower and then go straight to that objective like you were just saying. So is it more beneficial to take those top ones down quicker than the bottom ones?
That's a pretty good question. I'm not dead certain which way people are going to go on this one, because when we were talking about it before, about how we're pushing more credits into team objectives, that hasn't fundamentally changed certain ways in which people are going to look at the actual map and the map layout. So I feel like, for instance, the Raider is a great example of this. The Raider will be worth more credits, which means to me that Raider control is going to mean more, especially given when it shows up on the map. With that stated, once the first Raider has gone, I think you might see rotations. Okay. Because ultimately, you're going to see more of a rotation on the top anyway, because at that point in time, you're better off having top lane dominance. And there's something to be said about that compared to having one super hyper-leveled character. I mean, in the old days of what I refer to as the Holy Trinity, of Shazam, Batman, and, gosh, I've already lost it. No, Flash. So, I mean, out of those three, it made more sense to have them be way over-leveled, because they literally would just... they would just double lift that team on their shoulders and run rampant on other people. And I think that now, as we're seeing more and more characters get to be more even in terms of their general power scale, I think we're seeing a more true meta evolve, because it's not completely derived off of whether or not you have this character versus this character. It's now based a little bit more off of team makeup, team communication, and just overall mechanics and mechanical ability.
So talk about the Raider a little bit. There's no other changes on behavior to Raider or Doomsday device. Are they going to act the same way? Do they have the same... Can I still use crowd control on them, lower their attack speed and things like that? Is that all staying the same for this upcoming?
For this upcoming update, yes. We're looking to actually make it so that the actual Raider is a bit tougher, so you're not just running around soloing the Raider as time goes on. Same thing is said for the actual Doomsday device Guardian. Like, for both of those creatures, we want them to be tough enough that when you're gone from the map, people know enough to question where you might be. But other than that, they are generally staying the exact same.
Okay.
And because of that fact, a lot of the old tactics that people would use on them, we expect will remain valid.
So in terms of team play, which is one of our, changing our meta topics, you really are going to need a lot of communication amongst your team to say when, someone on the enemy side of your lane is missing, because they could have gone back to base, or they could have just bought at the tower,
right,
or they could just be going to bot lane, or
Absolutely.
they could be going to Doomsday Device. At this point, there's just another thing to add on top of, so you really want to make sure you're communicating with your team at all times.
Yes. And really, that's always been the name of the game, in my opinion. I mean, good team communication, good team accountability, and good team mechanics should win games over individual player skill. And I feel that each of these changes are effectively pushing us more in that direction. Even if they are, in fact, adding more tools to an individually skilled player, I feel they are, in net, adding much more to a skilled team.
Okay. If anybody in the chat has any questions, feel free to shout them out, and I'll be sure to ask them. I have a question myself. When are we going to be seeing these updates? When is this coming out? Is this soon?
So our next major patch update, which I believe is in December, I'm trying to remember when, probably earlier December, that's when you'll be seeing them.
Okay. And along with these changes, we'll see other new characters coming out and things like that.
Yes.
in the recent updates.
Yep.
So in December, we can expect to see the new drone behavior, which we talked about early on, which is they just won't attack champions unless there's nothing else for them to do.
Yep.
The credits, which you can now stomp out when this update comes up, and it'll stop your enemy from gaining these credits. You just walk over them and stomp them. You can last hit to get extra credits. And if you're in the lane with Harley Quinn, your buddy, or Arcane Green Lantern, helping you, supporting you out, they won't lose anything by staying in lane and having you just last hit. They don't need to pick anything up, or they can pick it up, and it'll just be...
it'll split as well.
It'll split and just be a little bit less than last hitting. And the final thing, which is, buying at turrets, which is a pretty big deal, and a change. Do you see this in MOBAs often? What sparked this change?
Well, actually, it's funny. The thing that really sparked it was a bunch of designers were all sitting around, and I was asking them in terms of what they thought about the general mechanic of just obviously going back, and why they found certain games more entertaining to watch than others. And one of the things that we keep getting internally is, what is it that makes IC what it is? Like, what is the thing that makes Infinite Crisis uniquely Infinite Crisis? And again, as part of my job, my goal is to make sure that we always stick to what that is, and make sure that I pull it into every aspect of our design. So when we first sat down and we were talking about other games, actually Fantas, who made this comment of like, I just really like the concept of this unrelenting action. And because of that fact, it was like, well, we kind of tossed around the idea, well, I guess then we could just make it so you don't ever have to go back to buy stuff. And then everyone laughed about it at first, and me being me, I'm like, well, what would actually happen? So we tried it out. And in all fairness, I've been looking for a way to get rid of consumables for a long time. I actually don't really think they add a great deal to how the game works. I think that they add a great deal of functionality. I mean, there's nothing, I'm not trying to take any of that away from you. I'm just saying that as a new player, if you come in and you're going to buy something that goes away versus buying something that's going to stay around, you generally don't want to waste your money on buying something that goes away. And the concept of making it so that each of these artifacts would stick with you is a very, very enticing one. I mean, you may not understand initially why you actually want the ability to heal yourself in the field, but at the same time, at least now you'll have an object that will consistently recharge. And this is what makes Tic-Tac-Type Vial so interesting for people, if they will buy that over a bunch of consumables, unless, of course, they are a character who doesn't use Will, in which case then they obviously buy packs. So with that in mind, it was like, well, why don't we do this? We'll take away consumables, so you don't have infinite sustain. And that way, there at least is some modicum of cadence of how the game will work. So that's what kind of brought us here, to that level of just constant conflict.
Okay, Crashy had a question on the artifacts, and we were just talking about it, so I figured I'd throw that one out first. are there going to be any changes to the harvest artifacts or refundable artifacts? Is that something we can talk about? Is there going to be, any new updates to them or anything?
We're going to do some pretty significant artifact changes. It's one of the things that I think I'll let Fax speak to at a later time. All of these things, all the changes that I've just talked about obviously impact the artifact and artifact balance. The existing live process that we already have has impacted that. I mean, there's certain artifacts that we all looked at and were like, wow, these are really, really effective. So those are also going to change as well. So you can expect some pretty comprehensive changes and just kind of redistribution of stats as part of this December update as well.
Okay. Colton Rivers had a question about buying at towers. This is one of our new changes coming up in the December update. If you're being hit under the tower while you're buying, is this going to stop you from buying? Is there any effect that's going to happen?
You should get basically the same screen overlay effect that you get when you're taking damage and you're not looking at your character.
Okay.
But overall, you can still buy things. People can't stop you from purchasing something based off that. It's not like it's not like you're channeling an action or you can be micro-stunned out of it. It's just that, you clearly have our store UI in the middle of your screen, so it might make it difficult.
So it's kind of a disadvantage for you to be buying at your store.
Yes, definitely.
And this leads into Garutza's question.
Okay.
In terms of stealth champions, do you feel like people are going to pick out more stealth champions? Is the stealth champion role going to be coming back into play a lot here because a lot of people will be having the store open, blocking their vision?
Well, I would hope not, only because I think if stealth champions come back into play, it should be because of the things they add across the board, as opposed to the single opportunity buy or opportunity catch they might be able to make of a person who's purchasing something at a turret when they have their UI blocking the screen. I mean, in that situation, virtually everyone is a stealth character. So, I mean, my suggestion in that world would be you're better off picking a person with a high movement speed, because as long as you come in out of the fog of war, they're not going to be able to see you, and you can just run in and gank them if they're at low enough health and then run out. So I don't think that will be the resurgence of the stealth champions per se. But with that stated, I don't know that Gascat needs more of a resurgence. I mean, she hasn't gone anywhere. She's still pretty much everywhere. I mean, I think Nightmare Batman, ironically enough, and I've been saying this for a while, I feel like he's always been a very viable laner. I think he will become a significantly more viable laner with these changes.
Okay, so Mean Mug and some others are a little bit worried about the snowball effect on some champions where they can just snowball and then get out of control and just take the lead for themselves and win. Is there any are these changes going to prevent snowball? Are we going to see any changes that kind of stop people from snowballing? Or is this going to just completely help them snowball a lot more?
Well, I think it depends upon, again, it depends on the reasons as to why the person is snowballing, as always. I mean, I feel like you're not really a sport unless individual player skill can allow you to outperform other people. And I feel like this is one of those things which I've kind of come to terms with in terms of just looking at how our game plays and just how sports play. I mean, the simple fact is that in any sport I can think of, at least any team sport, an individual person is capable of contributing at a level that is just far and far above their peers, and that's what makes them exciting to watch. So in the point of snowballing, I feel like snowballing is part of the game, no matter how you look at it. With that stated, our goal is not to make it so that any of our changes make any specific characters far better than everyone else, just mechanically.
Okay.
So, I mean, in this case, you can expect more and more balance changes to come through, to be specifically scrutinizing characters who don't have will usage, because I think that they're going to be the ones who are the most likely to gain the most benefits from these changes. And obviously anyone who actually has the ability to sustain very well. So that is the double crosshair on Gaslight Joker for anyone who didn't catch what I'm saying right now. So you would expect that I think that those types of characters will start seeing more tweaks to pull them back into line with their fulls.
So C. Woodward wanted to make it clear you can get health and will back at your base. You cannot get it for free at the towers.
Correct.
That is correct.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, Buana asked a question in chat, and he wanted to make sure what the range was on the buy at the towers. Is it still relatively the same as the tower range? Or
right now it's about the same as the tower range.
Okay, so if I just pay attention or know the range of where people are going to get hit within tower range, that's where I'll be able to buy,
Yes, that is where you'll be able to buy.
Okay, and Kazoon had some questions about champions to map, so we're going to be seeing some more champions focused to like Gotham Heights play, or more to Coast City play, or more to Gotham Divided play, or do we just make champions that hope to fit all the roles in all the maps?
Well,
not all the roles, but the specific
right.
role on all the maps.
I would say that for the most part, we just make all champions that are meant to fit on all the maps. So some of that is based off us having team fights in all the maps, like team fight objectives in all the maps, as opposed to having some maps who have no team fight objectives at all. I mean, Gotham Heights was a very different beast when you only have control points, because realistically there never should have been a team fight in Gotham Heights then. Now things are just a little bit different in that sense. So as a result, characters who really excel in the team fight phase can excel at least in portions of Gotham Heights, versus characters who are really, really good at skirmishing, 1v2 or 2v2. Like, those characters generally come into their own much more so in Gotham Heights than they will in Coast City, and obviously more so in Coast City, I feel, than they will in Gotham Divided. So when we make a character, we try to make sure they have all aspects of a good rounded play experience in them, and then from there, that typically dictates, like, how they're built dictates where they go.
Okay. And to roll into that question, DJ0GX asks, are we going to be seeing more support not artifacts, but amplifiers? Because right now we see them just building blaster and being able to do well just as a blaster.
Right.
Are we going to see more cooldown reduction or things that are going to help out, the support roles more in a support role than a damage dealing role?
Yeah, I think that right now we're actually looking at a lot of support and controller mechanics and just trying to make sure that there is actually more of a choice in how you build them, as opposed to just building two massive blasters. You're actually building a character who is really just meant to help out their entire team. So you can expect both changes from that, from the artifact point of view, and also just from where controllers get their ratios from.
Okay, a lot of people are excited about Gotham Divided. We all know this. I'm really excited about Gotham Divided, and you're more excited about Gotham Divided than anyone else. P-Hell asks, when can we expect Gotham Divided? And I don't know if you can say exactly when the date is, but can you give us as much details about Gotham Divided, what it is, and kind of just a little bit about it?
Sure. So Gotham Divided is our trialing map, and it is built off of all the things that we feel that we've learned from building both Gotham Heights and Coast City. I mean, there are some very specific things that make Infinite Crisis what it is, and in many ways, a lot of these changes are actually to set the stage for what is also Gotham Divided. Like, I want our game to be consistent all the way through, so it is important that each of our maps has a lot of those gameplay elements in them, and that's why, another reason as to why these changes are going live, so that you as the community can actually sit down, sink your teeth in them, tell us what's working, tell us what needs work, and basically just get your feet wet in terms of them. Now, in terms of Gotham Divided being a trial lane map, I've already talked about how we're going to push more and more credit density into the actual lanes themselves. Like, that's where you're getting most of your credits from. I also would say that if you like the Doomsday device, then you're going to love Gotham Divided, because there's a lot going on in Gotham Divided that really depends upon player skill and actions about what you do with advantages when you get them. And I fully expect that we're going to see some pretty crazy stuff once Divided goes live. I also expect that we will see Divided go live with whenever we go into open beta, because I can't really imagine our game going into open beta without its third map.
Okay, so that was a lot of information about Gotham Divided that we haven't really revealed too much.
Hey,
so,
sneak peek.
Yeah. Thank you for that. This also leads into Tavit's question. He asks if buying at towers is going to be permanent, or is this just something we want to try out, see how the community takes it, and then take into effect, what they feel and what they think and what you're seeing overall how it plays?
Well, actually, I think that for almost all the changes we're making now, we're getting much closer to determining exactly how our game really plays. So I feel that it is very likely that these changes specifically are going to be permanent, because they set a stage for how we are going to start shifting character balance moving forward, and even artifact balance moving forward. The good news, we've been testing them out internally for a while. I also think that there are a lot of changes that they are going to precipitate that are very important for us to learn from all of you. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens once we release our milestone CP7 out into the wild.
Okay, Peter Platinum's question is about the stomping term, which the stomping, in case you weren't here earlier, is the canceling out of enemy credits while they're on the ground. You just walk over them and deplete the credits. They can't get it. They don't get any credits for this.
Yep.
His question is, the initial philosophy behind the dropped credits was to emphasize last hitting. Now the threat of stomping seems to be making it more important. Any reasons for the reversal of thinking here?
Well, I wouldn't even say it's a reversal, at least not from my perspective. I mean, one of the things that really hit us in terms of actually making a lot of these mechanics work is if you're running around playing our game, it doesn't really make any sense that you're ghosting through certain things and not ghosting through others. Additionally, we've actually shortened the time to live enough that it's actually, if a person's not near it, they realistically can't get it anyway. So with those two changes, it made perfect sense to just allow you to be able to, like, as an enemy team, to be able to stomp them. Like, for instance, if you're pushing a lane or you're shoving a lane all the way out, that mechanic will not hurt you at all. It only really matters if you're actually in a pitched skill contest with someone else, and specifically a pitched skill contest with someone who likely is either a melee or a missile, whichever one is opposite of whatever role you're playing. And that's where I think this is going to come more into play. So I don't know that there's that much of a massive tension there, unless maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but I don't think so.
He hadn't responded back in the chat. I kept trying to see,
Sure.
to try and see if he had any replies back to you, but if he does, we'll go back to that question. Okay. Nick asks, will we be seeing any new stolen powers as more champions come out, or can we just expect more variations of the same powers?
I think you can expect more variations of the same powers. As it stands, I feel like our stolen power matrix is pretty full. I think you can also expect to see a pretty significant rebalancing of stolen powers as we move forward. I mean, again, we have a much better understanding of different situations you find yourself in our game now, and because of that fact, I think it is easier for us to look at certain stolen powers and decide, okay, this is the role this stolen power should fill versus the role this other stolen power should fill.
So, Snorkas wants to know, which I'm also really interested in as a caster, replays in spectator mode. Are we going to see this anytime soon? Is this going to come out to the public at all? Is this any idea where we have going with this?
I wish I could tell you more about our view match client. I do know that currently the way we expect it to work is since you can uplink it directly up to Twitch, your best way will obviously be to bookmark it and footnote it so that you can actually show it, like you can replay it that way and share it with your friends. In terms of its general accessibility, that's another question which is more driven by bandwidth concerns and just overall circulation. I mean, our view match client has no delay on it. That's something that is very important for people to realize. So there's also questions of fairness when it comes to tournaments that are very, very important, at least from my perspective, for people to really understand in terms of just letting the view match client out in the wild. So I think you can expect more info on that soon, certainly as we go further and further with more and more esport events.
Okay. Danek asks, is the open amplifier customization coming before beta? Before open beta? Are we gonna see that anytime soon? Or?
You will see that as part of that update in December.
Okay.
It will be a massive update in December. Massive.
And this is going to cover a lot of things, not just the topics of today, but the topics of today were the overall meta changes, and these ones are going to be kind of sweet touches. And
yes, I think that I'm very, very much looking forward to what will happen when everyone has full reign on what customization they really want to do to their amplifier system, specifically what artifacts they choose to mod versus what their base stat enhancements are going to be. And all that will be happening, obviously, on top of all the changes we talked about today.
So it's 4 o'clock. We only had an hour to do this interview. We've gotten to some questions. Let's just ask a few more questions, because I have you here, and a lot of people don't ever have the chance to ask you questions about our game, and they're getting a lot more information from this. And I'm enjoying this myself.
Loose lips.
Because I get to...
No marketing here, so
I know, right? I just get to pick you apart, and they can't stop. They're trying to open the door right now to get in, and it's not happening. I got the door locked. A lot of people are asking about Superman.
Oh, Superman.
And we haven't seen Superman too much.
By we, you clearly don't mean yourself or me.
Right.
Because we've seen plenty of Superman.
Oh, have we?
Yeah, I mean, but I don't know. I mean, look about all the releases we made. I mean, you look at all of the marketing images we've had, those splash images. Superman has been there for quite some time. I will say this. We've made Superman multiple times. Ironically enough, he I know this will be a shock to all of you. He is very OP, and we are doing our best to rein him in such that he still feels like Superman, but is fun for people to play against. So that is where we are currently with Man of Steel.
And you, just to be clear, I'm pretty sure you said we have multiple Supermen.
Oh yeah, to be fair, we built Superman Prime multiple times.
Okay.
Yes, but we also have multiple Supermen. That's also true. I mean, as I would hope all of you have seen, the multiverse treatment, the trinity of Superman. I mean, obviously we have basic Superman Prime in the middle, and we have Mecha Superman on, I believe, his right, and you have Nightmare Superman on his left. And each of those Supermen plays very differently, and in my opinion, is OP in their own special way.
So Peter Platt actually caught up with us, and he said, Jim, it's more of a question about player focus. If you don't have to concentrate on the last hitting, you can spend more of your energy being aggressive and lean.
Yes, that is absolutely true. And I feel like that's another decision that is made on a tactical sense, such that you can do that, and with the drone aggro changes, you absolutely can just punish another person. But if they are in turn capable of mitigating some of those damage, or mitigating some of that damage, while at the same time death blowing, they are going to beat you in terms of credits, which means while you may be winning early trades, they may just be pulling ahead of you in the long game. And it's that tension, like that's the triangle of actions that we really want you to be able to take. Not so much that we're trying to take away options that already exist for players. We're trying to add different gives and takes that give players with experience multiple options.
Expulsuk asks, will we be announcing any esport tournaments earlier and through Turbine? He felt the last tournament was kind of not announced right away. Is this something we want to make sure for next time?
I think, again, esports are not exactly my direct wing.
Right.
So I would say the best way to get a legitimate answer for that one would probably be to tweet Infinite Crisis.
Okay.
And I would hope that our esports wing would get back to you. I mean, I know that we've already announced some things through MLG because I've seen some of those, but other than that, I'm a little more heads down into the game than I would need to be to answer the question.
Okay, so if you follow us on Infinite Crisis on Twitter or Facebook, we have a lot more information there. And I'm sure you'll get tweets back or comments back saying when exactly these things might be happening, and I'm sure we'll be way more communicative on the tournaments that are going on, and because everyone loves watching the pros play.
That is true.
The tournaments are really fun to watch, and just seeing the Turbine versus Pro matches here are really fun to watch and cast.
They are.
Top Wop asks, is there any new style maps, or is Gotham Divided the only focus right now for upcoming maps?
I would say Gotham Divided is currently our only focus. With that stated, I don't ever want us to stop making competitive maps, and also even other types of maps. So right now, it's Coast City and Gotham Divided. Once Gotham Divided goes out, I think you can expect that we will start focusing on a separate type of map that will be, again, still uniquely Infinite Crisis, but a call out to other game modes you may have seen before and other maps. I don't foresee us really ever doing a 3v3. I think our 5v5 model is what I think defines us. I mean, I want us much more Justice League-y than random team ups. So, with that stated, you can expect some creative space within that framework.
Okay. Nick is asking, right now we have a lot of Batmen. Was that the initial focus, seeing all these Batmen right away? I know we're kind of leading away from the overall topics, but we'll conclude with the topics as a whole and just restate for everyone in case they missed it. PlayByGray here with Annuvin, Cardell, the creative director, answering our questions. So back to the question, the Batman, really early on we have a lot of Batmen. Is this something that was planned, or do we want to get the Batman out because is that the focus of Infinite Crisis, or?
Oh no, I would actually say that the focus of Infinite Crisis, in terms of the multiverse, was characters, heroes, and villains that you have known and loved, and their dark reflections, their twisted caricatures in some cases, or in other cases, a heroic counterpart. So you might, when you look at our existing character rosters, when you look at Batman and you see a Nightmare Batman on one side of him and a Gaslight Batman on another, we focus on him because he was one of the most iconic DC characters that you would ever know. You get what our game's about the instant you see the three of them together. And we obviously double down. I mean, we have the same number of Batman as we have of Wonder Woman, as we have of Green Lantern right now. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. We're getting close to getting where we have the same amount of Wonder Woman, because we're still one shy. But again, you can expect that you'll see that one more coming out soon. And I would say that same thing for Superman, for the Joker, for any of the characters you've seen trinities of. Those are the types of characters we're going to be coming out with. And right up front, we wanted to really just hammer it home that this game was about, again, these versions of these characters that you've never seen before that are familiar, yet obviously from a different place and different time. So this is why we started with him, and it's why we will continue as we move on. So.
And Peter Platt again comes back with more questions. Is there going to be map skins on certain maps? Will we see, you know, a Gotham Coast City-esque type thing, or are we going to see, you know, Green Lantern's home on Gotham Heights? Any sort of things like that?
We've definitely talked about map skins before. I think right now I would just like to get us to a point where you could actually have some festive aspects of it. I've been playing enough Origins to know that like it's kind of cool to see Gotham with that snowy blanket on top of it, and I would like to see more of that. Certainly for Heights, even though I imagine mixing those with meteors might be a little rough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that we've all talked about and we would definitely like to do. I mean, I personally would like to even get out of Gotham itself and just try a couple different other high aspect areas. Like I'm really looking forward to doing Metropolis. Like I think doing a City of Tomorrow, you know, pre-Man of Steel leveling where everything is a nice fine gray dust, but still, I would like to see some different places just in general.
Just to be clear, P-Hell asked another question: are we going to see more items in the future? And Cardell said yes, we'll see a lot more artifacts and changes to artifacts. And you know, to conclude this segment, we can go over, you know, in the new update, we won't see any more consumables. We'll have more tech-type bio.
Yes, more charges. More charge-driven items.
Yep. And other things we've talked about is changing the current meta to have more aggression. The drone behavior is going to change. They won't attack targets while you're attacking another champion. They'll only attack a champion if they have nothing else to do on their plate.
Yep.
Another thing was the stomping of the credits, and stomping is we use to take away from the enemy's credits and stop them from gaining any sort of credits, and you just walk over them. If they don't last hit, there'll be a credit on the ground. You walk over it, shows you how many credits you've stomped out and avoided your enemy from taking. And finally,
eventually.
Yeah, right. And finally is the buying at the turrets. Anyone can buy from a friendly turret and any friendly turret, and you can take advantage of this, and this will help in with the aggression, along with the experience buffs to the objectives, and you know, having more coordination team play will help you win the fight in Coast City.
That's a pretty good summary right there. I mean, I think that, again, think aggression. I think that is probably one of the most important guiding principles for this update. And yeah, well, I want to see where it goes.
So thanks for the community for joining us in chat. Thank you to Annuvin, Cardell, the creative director here at Turbine on Infinite Crisis. Thanks for everybody for showing up. That was it. This was a huge update that's coming out, and this was just a little sneak peek at the new meta coming to Infinite Crisis.
That is true. Expect to see more. Again, I'm hoping we can make this more of a habit, and you guys can get more time with the individual designers as they're working on specific systems that will be of strong interest to all of you.
And I snuck in a lot of questions that I wanted Cardell to answer myself. So to help you guys, I did that for you and the community out there. So PlayByGray here with Cardell. Thanks for joining us. Have a good rest of the week, guys. See you tomorrow on stream.